Alone in the Dark is a reimagining of the classic franchise by none other than some random racing game developer. And while the presentation at first glance may seem enticing, it won't take long until you realize why this game has such an awful reputation. Really, what the game consists of is going through various linear scripted environments, mostly just doing platforming, light puzzle solving, driving, so quote-unquote combat, and beating down doors with a hilariously wonky physics system. Oh, and most of the interactions you'll be having with the environment will be through throwing plastic bottles and alcoholic beverages at random things. That's it. You need to carry with you handfuls of explosives so you can throw and then shoot bottles at enemies frequently. The sad part is that not a single one of these things are ever entertaining or enjoyable. For starters, the controls are some of the worst I've ever dealt with. I'm not sure how to describe it. The game being made by a racing developer, it actually does feel like your player character behaves like a car on ice, with pseudo-tank controls and really strange momentum in the movement. The game can't decide if it wants to be a first-person game or a third-person game, so you end up fumbling through both of them frequently, and it just gets annoying quickly at how cumbersome the whole design is. You go into first-person to shoot a lock or a scripted device, that as soon as some trigger happens, it puts you back in third-person, only for you to go back in first-person because that's what you wanted. This happens once every 60 seconds on average maybe. It's just headache-inducing. So there's a fair bit of platforming with really poor controls, and sometimes you end up having to drive to an objective, and the irony here is that driving is also some of the worst of all time. You'd think this is the one thing they can get right, being racing game developers, but no. Before you can even drive the car, 9 out of 10 times you have to fumble around with your joystick, looking around the vehicle for keys, like opening up the glove box and stuff, or you can hotwire it. But it's so terribly messy because you frequently accidentally click a prompt in the slightly wrong location, so he opens up like the mirror instead of going for the hotwire. All the while you have 10 angry monsters storming your car just to pull you out. It's super frustrating and sloppily designed. There's just way too many what were they thinking moments. You get a few handguns, but I'm not really sure what the actual purpose of them, as you can only kill enemies by using fire, so shooting at them is really pointless unless you just want to knock them down. But then why not just use some melee object? Well, that's another thing. The actual combat versus the enemies is downright laughable and terrible. There's a system where you can pick up the most basic objects and swing them around using the right control stick, but it's so wonky and barely functioning, it just ends up looking like an autistic child throwing a tantrum. You pick up a piece of wood, run up to an enemy, flail around with your joystick like an idiot, until it eventually connects a few times, knocking them onto the ground. Then you have to make sure there's a fire source near you, so you can ignite an item, or push them into the fire to eliminate them. This usually happens with groups of like 10 enemies. It's not hard, challenging, or entertaining, it's just goddamn tedious. Like I said about the presentation, the game is deceptive. At first glance, the graphics are acceptable, considering it's a 2008 game. The lighting, textures, sound design are all fairly standard to actually good. There's some nice particle effects, like with the rain, and some of the environments can be pretty, and at times the physics system can feel natural in some regards. But when it comes to being the actual player in control, none of this ever feels anything remotely natural. Every action, interaction, reaction feels 100% entirely deliberate and forced. The controls, the camera, the physics momentum, nothing is ever enjoyable to do. Like for example, you'd think an inventory can't be too hard to fuck up, right? But the one in this game is famously dogshit. There's this awful system where you open up your jacket to display your carried items, which is sort of a cool concept, but in execution it's incredibly clunky, having to carefully direct your joystick to the potential slot of an item, then hit A on the exact right spot, make sure you select it, A again, close the inventory, and it doesn't pause the game all the while this is happening. So you often need to make a Molotov cocktail in a tense environment, only to be fumbling with your crappy controls, crappy inventory, and get hit over and over by enemies while you're just trying to make a plastic bottle and throw it at them. What were they thinking with this shit? The story is just barely entertaining enough to hold the game together, although it's not quite memorable. There's some weird biblical satanic paranormal shit going on, but really it's just a means to an end. You don't get too invested in it at all, because the characters are all very cookie cutter and not unique. The whole time I just felt like I was playing an even worse Alan Wake clone. Not good. Towards the end of the game, it tries to go all open world on you by giving you a chunk of a city to drive around in, only forcing you from progressing the main story until you do an essential fetch quest of collecting 75 items. You have to go around throwing plastic explosive bottles at red tree roots. Why? I don't know. I never gave a fuck. I was just in awe that the game could actually get this grueling and painstaking. Just when you think it's almost over, you're at the final stretch, the game gives you a big fuck you and makes you waste even more hours tediously driving back and forth, looking for plastic bottles, throwing them at trees, just to get to the next closing chapters. Complete shit tier game, I mean, what the fuck? At a certain part though, after so many of these collected, you get this DVD style menu and you can skip parts, so I obviously did that. You don't miss anything, other than a giant time sink, but it's still only available after a certain amount is collected. The game's difficulty starts at piss easy, to eventually becoming gruelingly annoying and frustrating, not due to a lack of skill, but due to buggy mechanics, awful game design, and really obscure and vague scripted triggers and enemy placements. There's one part where it spawns about 50 enemies in a castle that you have to continuously catch on fire over and over and over and over, and it just had me wanting to reach for the uninstall button. But I didn't, I beat the whole thing. There's really nothing redeemable here. The only reason to be interested in this is if you were just watching someone playing it, just to watch the cheesy story and laugh at it. Otherwise, stay away. Whatever you do, don't play this crap. 3 out of 10.